Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I once again welcome you all to Prepcademy live listening sessions. So today we are going to take up that question, which is very difficult for all of you. And I have got many requests and reviews that we should do that question. So that is map labeling question. So I think many of you have a problem in these type of questions and you find it difficult and you're not able to solve it. And there was one more kind of such question, which was MCQ. And I think in the last session, most of you were able to crack that type of question. It is multiple choice question. So I would like to help you in this question also. So first of all, before that, first let's complete the complete test. In the previous session, we did 20 questions. First of all, we will complete those 20 questions and then we'll do the map labeling part. So first of all, I would like to tell you about our YouTube channel. And suppose if you miss any video, if you join in between, so you can see all the videos on YouTube, and all the videos are live streamed on YouTube and they are posted also. So whenever you get time, you can see all the videos and you can make notes out of that, so that at the last moment you need not to see the videos again and again. You are just reading your notes and you are good to go with your exam. Okay, so I'll drop the link for the YouTube channel in the chat box. So hi Priya, hi Tarun, how are you?
Fine, ma'am. See?
I'm also good, thank you. So Priya, do you find problem in map labeling?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Tarun, do you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so don't worry. आज के बाद you will find these questions very easy. तो पहले हम वो वाला mock test complete कर लेते हैं जो हमने start किया था. So just give me a minute, or in the meantime you can take out your pen and paper and just be ready. And to all the students who have joined us live on YouTube, you can also please take out your pen and paper and please be ready for the listening mock.
मैम 14 क्वेश्चन हुए थे उस दिन, 20 तो नहीं हुए?
उसके बाद एक और सेक्शन कर लिया था हमने, तो अगर आपने नहीं किए तो हम 14 के बाद ही स्टार्ट कर लेंगे. शायद आपने बाद में ज्वाइन नहीं किया था. वी डिड वन मोर सेक्शन आफ्टर दैट. डोंट वरी, हम 14 के बाद कर लेंगे. ओके, आई विल जस्ट शेयर माय स्क्रीन. तो यहां तक हमने कर लिए थे, राइट? उसके बाद वी हैव टू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम क्वेश्चन 15. तो लेट मी प्ले द ऑडियो, और ये ऑडियो कंटिन्यूएशन में चलेगी. सो यू विल नॉट गेट एनी टाइम इन बिटवीन. जैसे कि एक्चुअल एग्जाम में होता है, ऑडियो वैसे ही चलेगी और ना ही बीच में कोई पॉज होगा. आपको बस मॉक कंप्लीट करना है 40 क्वेश्चंस, और बाद में यू कैन चेक योर आंसर्स एंड लेट मी नो हाउ मच यू स्कोर्ड. और उसके बाद हम मैप वाले क्वेश्चंस करेंगे.
Stressed about the interview there. It's just a chance. And Northern Ireland to the west, which used to be the capital of the island. Really? That's funny. There have been hundreds of studies on twins.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20.
Okay, I'll just pause the video, audio for a minute, because some students are joining. तो आप सब एक साथ में कर लो, तो that would be great for all of you. Just give me a minute. Hi Bhavan, hi Jaspreet. So हम listening का mock test complete कर रहे हैं जो हमारा last time रह गया था from question 15, और उसके बाद आज हम map labeling के question करने वाले हैं जिसमें आप सबको difficulty है. So please be ready, take out your pen and paper, और let me know जब आप सब ready हो तो I'll play the audio. Just give me a thumbs up if you are ready. I'll play the audio. Okay, Priya. Rest of the students, Tarun, Pavan, Jaspreet. Okay, Pavan. Tarun and Jaspreet. Okay, so I'm playing the audio now. Audio started hai and they have given you the time to read.
Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Okay, so what does the holiday consist of? Well, on day 1, you'll arrive in time for a short introduction by your tour manager, followed by dinner in the hotel. The dining room looks out at the river, close to where it flows into the harbour, and there's usually plenty of activity going on. On day 2, you'll take the coach to the small town of Peel, on the way calling in at the Tynwald exhibition. The Isle of Man isn't part of the United Kingdom, and it has its own parliament called Tynwald. It's claimed that this is the world's oldest parliament that's still functioning, and that it dates back to 979. However, the earliest surviving reference to it is from 1422, so perhaps it isn't quite as old as it claims. Day 3, we have a trip to the mountain Snaefell. This begins with a leisurely ride along the promenade in Douglas in a horse-drawn tram. Then you board an electric train which takes you to the fishing village of Laxey. From there, it's an 8-kilometre ride in the Snaefell Mountain Railway to the top. Lunch will be in the cafe, giving you spectacular views of the island. Day 4 is free for you to explore, using the pass which we'll give you. So you won't have to pay for travel on local transport or for entrance to the island's heritage sites. Or you might just want to take it easy in Douglas and perhaps do a little light shopping. The last full day, day 5, is for some people the highlight of the holiday, with a ride on the steam railway from Douglas to Port Erin. After some time to explore, a coach will take you to the headland that overlooks the Calf of Man, a small island just off the coast. From there, you continue to Castletown, which used to be the capital of the Isle of Man and its medieval castle. And on day 6, it's back to the ferry, or the airport if you flew to the island, and time to go home. Now, I'd like to tell you a bit more.
That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear 2 psychology students discussing the effects of the order in which the children in a family are born. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Ed,
How are you getting on with the reading for our presentation next week?
Well, okay, Ruth, but there's so much of it.
I know. I hadn't realised birth order was such a popular area of research.
But the stuff on birth order and personality is mostly unreliable. From what I've been reading, a lot of the claims about how your position in the family determines certain personality traits are just stereotypes, with no robust evidence to support them.
OK, but that's an interesting point. We could start by outlining what previous research has shown. There are studies going back over 100 years.
Yeah, so we could just run through some of the typical traits. Like the consensus seems to be that oldest children are generally less well-adjusted because they never get over the arrival of a younger sibling.
Right, but on a positive note, some studies claim that they were thought to be good at nurturing. Certainly in the past, when people had large families, they would have been expected to look after the younger ones.
There isn't such a clear picture for middle children, but one trait that a lot of the studies mention is that they are easier to get on with than older or younger siblings.
Generally eager to please and helpful, although that's certainly not accurate as far as my family goes. My middle brother was a nightmare, always causing fights and envious of whatever I had.
As I said, none of this seems to relate to my own experience. I'm the youngest in my family, and I don't recognise myself in any of the studies I've read about. I'm supposed to have been a sociable and confident child who made friends easily, but I was actually terribly shy.
Really? That's funny. There have been hundreds of studies on twins, but mostly about nurture versus nature.
There was one on personality which said that a twin is likely to be quite shy in social situations because they always have their twin around to depend on for support.
My cousins were like that when they were small. They were only interested in each other and found it hard to engage with other kids. They're fine now, though.
Only children have had a really bad press. A lot of studies have branded them as loners who think the world revolves around them because they've never had to fight for their parents' attention.
That does seem a bit harsh. One category I hadn't considered before was children with much older siblings. A couple of studies mentioned that these children grow up more quickly and are expected to do basic things for themselves, like getting dressed.
I can see how that might be true, although I expect they're sometimes the exact opposite, playing the baby role and clamouring for special treatment.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
What was the problem with most of these studies, do you think?
I think it was because, in a lot of cases, data was collected from only one sibling per family, who rated him or herself and his or her siblings at the same time.
Some of the old research into the relationship between birth order and academic achievement has been proved to be accurate, though. Performances in intelligence tests declined slightly from the eldest child to his or her younger siblings. This has been proved in lots of recent studies.
Yes, although what many of them didn't take into consideration was family size. The more siblings there are, the likelier the family is to have a low socio-economic status, which can also account for differences between siblings in academic performance.
The oldest boy might be given more opportunities than his younger sisters, for example.
Exactly.
But the main reason for the marginally higher academic performance of oldest children is quite surprising, I think. It's not only that they benefit intellectually from extra attention at a young age, which is what I would have expected. It's that they benefit from being teachers for their younger siblings by verbalising processes.
Right. And this gives them status and confidence, which again contributes in a small way to better performance. So, Would you say sibling rivalry has been a useful thing for you?
I think so. My younger brother was incredibly annoying, and we fought a lot. But I think this has made me a stronger person. I know how to defend myself. We had some terrible arguments, and I would have died rather than apologise to him. But we had to put up with each other, and most of the time we coexisted amicably enough.
Yes, my situation was pretty similar. But I don't think having 2 older brothers made me any less selfish. I was never prepared to let my brothers use any of my stuff.
That's perfectly normal, whereas sometimes...
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3. Part 4. You will hear a student giving a presentation about a type of tree known as the eucalyptus, which is common in Australia. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I'm going to talk about the eucalyptus tree. This is a very common tree here in Australia, where it's also sometimes called the gum tree. First, I'm going to talk about why it's important. Then I'm going to describe some problems it faces at present. Right, well, the eucalyptus tree is an important tree for lots of reasons. For example, it gives shelter to creatures like birds and bats, and these and other species also depend on it for food, particularly the nectar from its flowers. So it supports biodiversity. It's useful to us humans too, because we can kill germs with a disinfectant made from oil extracted from eucalyptus leaves. The eucalyptus grows all over Australia, and the trees can live for up to 400 years. So it's alarming that all across the country, numbers of eucalyptus are falling because the trees are dying off prematurely. So, what are the reasons for this? One possible reason is disease. As far back as the 1970s, the trees started getting a disease called Mundula yellows. The tree's leaves would gradually turn yellow, then the tree would die. It wasn't until 2004 that they found the cause of the problem was lime, or calcium hydroxide, to give it its proper chemical name, which was being used in the construction of roads. The lime was being washed away into the ground and affecting the roots of the eucalyptus trees nearby. What it was doing was preventing the trees from sucking up the iron they needed for healthy growth. When this was injected back into the affected trees, they immediately recovered. But this problem only affected a relatively small number of trees. By 2000, huge numbers of eucalyptus were dying along Australia's east coast of a disease known as bell miner associated dieback. The bell miner is a bird, and the disease seems to be common where there are high populations of bell miners. Again, it's the leaves of the trees that are affected. What happens is that insects settle on the leaves and eat their way round them, destroying them as they go, and at the same time they secrete a solution which has sugar in it. The bell miner birds really like this solution, and in order to get as much as possible, they keep away other creatures that might try to get it. So these birds and insects flourish at the expense of other species, and eventually so much damage is done to the leaves that the tree dies. But experts say that trees can start looking sick before any sign of bell miner associated dieback. So it looks as if the problem might have another explanation. One possibility is that it's to do with the huge bushfires that we have in Australia. A theory proposed over 40 years ago by ecologist William Jackson is that the frequency of bushfires in a particular region affects the type of vegetation that grows there. If there are very frequent bushfires in a region, this encourages grass to grow afterwards, while if the bushfires are rather less frequent, this results in the growth of eucalyptus forests. So, why is this? Why do fairly frequent bushfires actually support the growth of eucalyptus? Well, one reason is that the fire stops the growth of other species which would consume water needed by eucalyptus trees. And there's another reason. If these other quick-growing species of bushes and plants are allowed to proliferate, they harm the eucalyptus in another way by affecting the composition of the soil and removing nutrients from it. So some bushfires are actually essential for the eucalyptus to survive as long as they are not too frequent. In fact, there's evidence that Australia's Indigenous people practiced regular burning of bushland for thousands of years before the arrival of the Europeans. But since Europeans arrived on the continent, the number of bushfires has been strictly controlled. Now, scientists believe that this reduced frequency of bushfires to low levels has led to what's known as dry rainforest, which seems an odd name as usually we associate tropical rainforest with wet conditions. And what's special about this type of rainforest? Well, unlike tropical rainforest, which is a rich ecosystem, this type of ecosystem is usually a simple one. It has very thick, dense vegetation, but not much variety of species. The vegetation provides lots of shade, so one species that does find it ideal is the bell miner bird, which builds its nests in the undergrowth there. But again, that's not helpful for the eucalyptus tree.
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4.
So these are all the answers of the 40 questions. Please check your answers and let me know how much you scored. And then we'll do the map labeling. Let me know when you are done checking the answers.
That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.
Ma'am, 27.
27 is very less, Priya. Okay, Tarun, how much you scored? 18 out of? Your voice is breaking. And 27 is very less, Priya, very less. Just listening is very easy. कौन से part में you are not able to do? कौन सा part आपको difficult लग रहा है?
मैम वही वाला एक तो जो डिस्क्रिप्शन नहीं थी एल्डेस्ट चाइल्ड और एक एमसीक्यू.
MCQs वाले में आप थे जब हमने प्रैक्टिस की थी MCQs की?
मैम वो वाले मेरे चारों सही है 11 to 14.
Okay, नहीं जब हमने प्रैक्टिस की थी स्पेसिफिकली MCQs की, were you there in the session?
नो मैम.
Okay, तो please try to attend all the sessions. उस दिन last to last session में हमने specifically MCQs ही practice किए थे, and all the students were able to solve all the questions. So please try to attend all the classes ताकि आप maximum benefit कर सको. और 27 score listening के हिसाब से बहुत कम है. At least you should aim more than 35. क्योंकि listening is very easy. और आप concentrate करो, ध्यान दो, question को पढ़ो. अब मैं एक क्वेश्चन आपको बताने जा रही हूँ कि ये कैसे करने हैं और देन यू हैव टू सी. और जैसे मैं आपको ये अप्रोच बताऊंगी इस क्वेश्चन की, वैसे ही आपको हर क्वेश्चन करना है. और ये आज हम करेंगे मैप लेबलिंग का क्वेश्चन. जस्ट गिव मी अ मिनट. Okay, so I'll share my screen. अब ये क्वेश्चन आप देख रहे हो अपनी स्क्रीन पे, दैट इज मैप लेबलिंग. सो लेबल द प्लान बिलो, राइट द करेक्ट लेटर A to G नेक्स्ट टू क्वेश्चन 17 to 20. अब इस क्वेश्चन का मतलब समझ में आ गया आपको कि आपको बताना है कि बॉक्स ऑफिस कौन सा है, ए से G में से, थिएटर मैनेजर का ऑफिस कौन सा है. सो सी, जब आप पेन एंड पेपर वेस्ट दे रहे हो तब आप क्या कर सकते हो कि आप अपनी पेंसिल लेके जहां पे वो आपको बोल रहे हैं, सो व्हेन दे टेल यू दिस इज योर स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट. सपोज कर अब आप एंट्रेंस देख रहे हो रोड के पास, सो दिस इज योर एंट्रेंस. और जब वो आपको बोले कि एंट्रेंस आपकी यहाँ से है, आप वहां पे अपनी पेंसिल रखो जहां से आपने एंटर किया. और जैसे जैसे वो इंस्ट्रक्शंस देते जाएंगे, यू हैव टू ब्लाइंडली फॉलो दोज इंस्ट्रक्शंस. आपको वो फॉलो करनी है ब्लाइंडली, बिना कुछ सोचे. यू हैव टू फॉलो दोज इंस्ट्रक्शंस और वो आपको जहां पहुंचाए बस दैट विल बी योर आंसर. पर आपको ध्यान रखना है लेफ्ट कहाँ पे है, राइट कहाँ पे, अक्रॉस क्या होता है, बियॉन्ड क्या होता है. सो दिस ऑल यू शुड नो. तो अभी तो ये डिजिटल है तो शायद थोड़ा सा मुश्किल हो सकता है, बट व्हेन यू आर डूइंग पेन एंड पेपर तो योर पेंसिल शुड गो, यू शुड फॉलो द डायरेक्शंस दे आर टेलिंग यू. आपको ब्लाइंडली फॉलो करना है. यहाँ पे भी यू ट्राई कि आप ऐसे ही डिजिटली, इफ यू आर एबल टू डू इट, ऐसे भी यू शुड प्रैक्टिस, ताकि जब आप पेन एंड पेपर पे करो फिर आपको बहुत इजी लगे. शैल वी स्टार्ट? एक करके देखें, फिर अगर डिफिकल्टी हुई तो आई विल डू द सेकंड वन विद यू.
ओके मैम.
रेडी एवरीबडी? तरुण, जसकरण, आर यू रेडी? ओके.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, a word about the layout of the building. The auditorium, stage and dressing rooms for the actors are all below ground level. Here on the ground floor, we have most of the rooms that the public doesn't see. The majority are internal, so they have windows in the roof to light them. Standing here in the foyer, you're probably wondering why the box office isn't here, where the public would expect to find it. Well, you might have noticed it on your way in. Although it's part of this building, it's next door, with a separate entrance from the road. For the theatre manager's office, you go across the foyer and through the double doors. Turn right, and it's the room at the end of the corridor, with the door on the left. The lighting box is where the computerized stage lighting is operated, and it's at the back of the building. When you're through the double doors, turn left, turn right at the water cooler, and right again at the end. It's the second room along that corridor. The lighting box has a window into the auditorium, which of course is below us. The artistic director's office is through the double doors, turn right, and it's the first room you come to on the right-hand side. And finally, for the moment, the room where I'll take you next, the relaxation room. So, if you'd like to come with me.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Check your answers and tell me how many were correct. Okay, good, Jaskaran. Yes, Priya, Tarun, कितने ठीक हैं आपके? Okay, good. Priya,
मैम मेरे सारे ही गलत हैं।
क्यों गलत क्यों हैं सारे आपके?
मैम मेरे पता ही नहीं, मैं पता ही नहीं सही।
चलो एक बार दोबारा देखते हैं, मैं आपको बताती हूँ एक बार फिर से। अब आप ध्यान से देखना, जहां पे वो बोल रहे हैं उसको वैसे ही फॉलो करना है आपको।
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, a word about the layout of the building. The auditorium, stage and dressing rooms for the actors are all below ground level. Here on the ground floor, we have most of the rooms that the public doesn't see. The majority are internal, so they have windows in the roof to light them. Standing here in the foyer, you're probably wondering why the box office isn't here, where the public would expect to find it. Well, you might have noticed it on your way in. Although it's part of this building, it's next door, with a separate entrance from the road. For the theatre manager's office, you go across the foyer and through the double doors. Turn right, and it's the room at the end of the corridor, with the door on the left.
ये वाला किस किस का ठीक था? तरुण, जसकरण, आपका ठीक था ये? ओके प्रिया, अब इसका आंसर है जी। इसका आंसर जी क्यों है? सो उसने पहले क्या बोला कि फोयर, उसने बोला फोयर, तो फोयर यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, कैन यू सी फोयर, डबल डोर के बाद के पास लिखा हुआ है।
हाँ जी मैम।
तो उसने पहले बोला कि वहां पे बॉक्स ऑफिस नहीं है, यहाँ पे जब सारे एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि यहाँ पे होगा, पर यहाँ पे नहीं है। कहाँ पे है? नेक्स्ट डोर पे है, एंट्रेंस की। उन्होंने बोला इट इज नेक्स्ट डोर एट द एंट्रेंस विच इज नेक्स्ट टू द रोड, और रोड के नेक्स्ट क्या है? एंट्रेंस, नेक्स्ट डोर, तो दैट इज जी।
ओके ओके।
उसको सुनो ध्यान से, वो क्या बोल रही है। अब सेकंड आप मुझे बताओगे इसका आंसर क्या है। आई विल नॉट टेल यू। ओके।
Before you... Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20. Now, a word about the layout of the building. The auditorium, stage and dressing rooms for the actors are all below ground level. Here on the ground floor, we have most of the rooms that the public doesn't see. The majority are internal, so they have windows in the roof to light them. Standing here in the foyer, you're probably wondering why the box office isn't here, where the public would expect to find it. Well, you might have noticed it on your way in. Although it's part of this building, it's next door, with a separate entrance from the road. For the theatre manager's office, you go across the foyer and through the double doors. Turn right, and it's the room at the end of the corridor, with the door on the left. The lighting box...
Okay, so what did she say? क्या बोला उसने? आप मुझे आंसर बताओ इसका पहले, अगर आपको मिला।
मैम यस, इसका आंसर डी आएगा। उन्होंने ना ये बोला कि उसका एंड है कॉरिडोर का।
डबल डोर से राइट जाके कॉरिडोर का एंड है और गेट लेफ्ट साइड पे है, तो उसका डी ही हुआ ना।
ठीक है, पता लग गया।
तो आपको बस सुनना है वो क्या बोल रहे हैं, ठीक है? तो अब आप नेक्स्ट ट्राई करोगे?
यस।
चलो अब हम नेक्स्ट करते हैं। ओके, तो अभी ध्यान से पढ़ना, आप ध्यान से सुनना।
ओके।
और इसमें सारे आंसर्स ठीक होने चाहिए आपके, सबके आपके आंसर्स ठीक होने चाहिए।
Sometimes while writing my newsletters, I tend to type so fast that there are spelling errors or some of my sentences just sound confusing.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
OK, so this slide shows a map of the central area of Granford with the High Street in the middle and School Road on the right. Now, we already have a set of traffic lights in the High Street at the junction with Station Road, but we're planning to have another set at the other end at the School Road junction to regulate the flow of traffic along the High Street. We've decided we definitely need a pedestrian crossing. We considered putting this on School Road just outside the school, but in the end we decided that could lead to a lot of traffic congestion. So we decided to locate it on the High Street, crossing the road in front of the supermarket. That's a very busy area, so it should help things there. We are proposing some changes to parking. At present, parking isn't allowed on the High Street outside the library, but we are going to change that and allow parking there. but not at the other end of the high street near School Road. There'll be a new no parking sign on School Road just by the entrance to the school, forbidding parking for 25 metres. This should improve visibility for drivers and pedestrians, especially on the bend just to the north of the school. As far as disabled drivers are concerned, at present they have parking outside the supermarket, but lorries also use those spaces, so we've got 2 new disabled parking spaces on the side road up towards the bank. It's not ideal, but probably better than the present arrangement. We also plan to widen the pavement on School Road. We think we can manage to get an extra half metre on the bend just before you get to the school, on the same side of the road. Finally, we've introduced new restrictions on loading and unloading for the supermarket, so lorries will only be allowed to stop there before 8 a.m. That's the supermarket on School Road. We kept to the existing arrangements with the High Street supermarket. OK, so that's about it. OK, so this slide shows a map of the central area of Granford with the High Street in the middle and School Road on the right. Now, we already have a set of traffic lights in the High Street at the junction with Station Road, but we're planning to have another set at the other end at the School Road junction to regulate the flow of traffic along the High Street. We've decided we definitely need a pedestrian crossing. We considered putting this on School Road just outside the school, but in the end we decided that could lead to a lot of traffic congestion. So we decided to locate it on the High Street, crossing the road in front of the supermarket. That's a very busy area, so it should help things there. We're proposing some changes to parking. At present, parking isn't allowed on the High Street outside the library, but we're going to change that and allow parking there, but not at the other end of the High Street near School Road. There'll be a new no parking sign on School Road just by the entrance to the school, forbidding parking for 25 metres. This should improve visibility for drivers and pedestrians, especially on the bend just to the north of the school. As far as disabled drivers are concerned, at present they have parking outside the supermarket, but lorries also use those spaces, so we've got 2 new disabled parking spaces on the side road up towards the bank. It's not ideal, but probably better than the present arrangement. We also plan to widen the pavement on School Road. We think we can manage to get an extra half metre on the bend just before you get to the school, on the same side of the road. Finally, we've introduced new restrictions on loading and unloading for the supermarket, so lorries will only be allowed to stop there before 8 a.m. That's the supermarket on School Road. We kept to the existing arrangements with the High Street supermarket. OK, so that's about it.
Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, if you can take a look at your plans, you'll see Branley Castle has 4 towers joined together by a high wall, with the river on 2 sides. Don't miss seeing the Great Hall. That's near the river in the main tower, the biggest one, which was extended and redesigned in the 18th century. If you want to get a good view of the whole castle, you can walk around the walls. The starting point's quite near the main entrance. Walk straight down the path until you get to the south gate, and it's just there. Don't go on to the north gate. There's no way up from there. There'll shortly be a show in which you can see archers displaying their skill with a bow and arrow.
Please check your answers and tell me how many were correct.
मैम 4 करेक्ट है 7 में से.
Okay, so that's an improvement in last deck of questions. None of them was correct. Okay, so that's good. एक और करते हैं और उसमें ट्राई कि आपके सारे ठीक हों.
ओके मैम.
Okay.
You have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Now let me give you some idea of the layout of the farm. The building where you bought your tickets is the new barn immediately to your right, and we're now at the beginning of the main path to the farmland, and of course the car park is on your left. The scarecrow you can see in the car park in the corner beside the main path is a traditional figure for keeping the birds away from crops. But our scarecrow is a permanent sculpture. It's taller than a human being, so you can see it from quite a distance. If you look ahead of you, you'll see a maze. It's opposite the new barn, beside the side path that branches off to the right, just over there. The maze is made out of hedges which are too tall for young children to see over them, but it's quite small, so you can't get lost in it. Now, can you see the bridge crossing the fish pool further up the main path? If you want to go to the cafe, go towards the bridge and turn right just before it. Walk along the side path and the cafe's on the first bend you come to. The building was originally the schoolhouse, and it's well over 100 years old. As you may know, we run skills workshops here, where you can learn traditional crafts like woodwork and basket making. You can see examples of the work and talk to someone about the courses in the Black Barn. If you take the side path to the right, here, just by the new barn, you'll come to the Black Barn, just where the path first bends. Now, I mustn't forget to tell you about picnicking, as I can see some of you have brought your lunch with you. You can picnic in the field, though do clear up behind you, of course. Or if you'd prefer a covered picnic area, there's one near the farmyard, just after you cross the bridge. There's a covered picnic spot on the right. And the last thing to mention is Fiddy House itself. From here you can cross the bridge, then walk along the footpath through the field to the left of the farmyard. That goes to the house, and it'll give you a lovely view of it. It's certainly worth a few photographs, but as it's a private home, I'm afraid you can't go inside. Right, well, if you're all ready, we'll set off on our tour of the farm.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
मैम 5 out of 6.
Good. So that's an improvement. तो आपको प्रैक्टिस करनी पड़ेगी. आप देखो भी आपने सिर्फ 3 सेट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस किए हैं एंड यू हैव इम्प्रूव्ड अ लॉट. पर ऐसा नहीं है, कई बार डिफिकल्टी लेवल मुश्किल भी हो सकता है या इजी भी हो सकता है, पर आपको हर डिफिकल्टी लेवल के हिसाब से यू शुड नो द टेक्निक हाउ टू डू इट. इफ यू वंस लर्न द टेक्निक तो कोई भी क्वेश्चन यू विल नॉट फाइंड टफ. सो दैट्स गुड. दैट्स अ गुड इम्प्रूवमेंट. तो और एक और क्वेश्चन बोल रहे थे आप जिसमें आपको प्रॉब्लम है, मैच में शायद बोल रहे थे आप,
कौन से क्वेश्चन में?
जो आपने कंप्लीट टेस्ट में गलत किए थे।
डिस्क्रिप्शन, यस मैम।
ओके, चलो एक ये करते हैं हम, बाकी ये जो बच जाएंगे विल डू इन द नेक्स्ट लिसनिंग सेशन। तो इसमें आपको क्या करना है, मैं आपको एक बार अप्रोच बता देती हूँ, हाउ यू हैव टू डू इट। तो आपको जब आपको टाइम देते हैं पढ़ने का, यू जस्ट रीड द ऑप्शंस, डोंट रीड द क्वेश्चन। क्वेश्चन पढ़ के कुछ नहीं होगा, क्योंकि जब आप सुन रहे हो क्वेश्चन तो आप तब पढ़ ही लोगे कि एशिया है पहला, मुझे एशिया सुनना है। सो रीड द ऑप्शंस। जब आपके ऑप्शंस दिमाग में आएंगे और सपोज करो फर्स्ट एशिया है, आपने एशिया आपने सुन लिया, तो आप सारे क्वेश्चन ऑप्शन साथ में पढ़ते रहो कि वो क्या बोल रहे हैं, किसकी बात कर रहे हैं। तो ऑप्शंस माइंड में होने और बार बार पढ़ने बहुत जरूरी है। क्वेश्चन पे फोकस मत करना, ऑप्शंस पे फोकस करना और ऑडियो पे करना। चलो लेट्स ट्राई, फिर देखते हैं।
Section 2. You will hear a representative of a city council giving information about 2 new facilities which are opening soon in the city. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14.
And the children's adventure playground in some of the other buildings in the area. There'll also be a competition for the public to decide on the sculpture we plan to have.
Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
And now, moving on to the Central Park Playground, which we're pleased to announce has just won the Douglas Award for Safety. The news came through only last week. The unique design is based on the concept of the global village, with the playground being divided into 6 areas showing different parts of the world, each with a representative feature. For example, there is a section on Asia, and this is represented by rides and equipment in the shape of snakes, orangutans, tigers and so on, fauna native to the forests of the region. Moving south to the Antarctic, we couldn't run to an ice rink, I'm afraid, but opted instead for climbing blocks in the shape of mountains. I thought they could have had slides for the glaciers, but the designers did want to avoid being too literal. Then on to South America. And here the theme is El Dorado, games replicating the search for mines full of precious stones. And then, moving up to North America, here there was considerable debate. I know the contribution of cinema and jazz was considered, but the designers finally opted for rockets and the International Space Station. Eastwards to Europe then, and perhaps the most traditional choice of all the areas, medieval castles and other fortifications. Then last but not least, moving south to Africa, and a whole set of wonderful mosaics and trails to represent the great rivers of this fascinating and varied continent. Now, the opening date for our global playground is the 10th of July, and again, we'd love to see you there. So, make a date and come and see this magnificent, original new amenity right in the heart of the city.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
मैम एक बार बैक करना ऑप्शंस पे, एक आंसर। मैम एक गलत हुआ है बस।
चलो गुड। तो जो भी आप अभी अप्रोच यूज कर रहे हो इसको माइंड में रखना और यही यूज करना, क्योंकि एक अप्रोच मैटर करती है कि आप किस अप्रोच से किसी क्वेश्चन को सॉल्व कर रहे हो। फिर वो कोई भी क्वेश्चन आ जाए तो आप कर पाओगे। ओके, तो दैट वाज अ लॉट ऑफ इम्प्रूवमेंट टुडे। तो आप सारे सेशंस अटेंड करो। सो आई एम श्योर कि आप यू कैन डू मच बेटर बिकॉज यू हैव द पोटेंशियल।
और मैम तो आपने YouTube पे चैनल बताया कि उसमें सारे सेशंस होते हैं, और वो कौन सा मतलब वो कौन से पेज से है?
एक मिनट, मैं लिंक ड्रॉप कर देती हूँ, आप फॉलो कर लेना फिर. So let me tell you about our regular classes also. We have regular classes. We have started regular classes pandemic की वजह से, क्योंकि students are not able to go outside and attend classes in many of the states of India. So what we have done is we are conducting regular classes and the fee is very minimal for that. और वो regular classes होंगी और उसमें आपको like जैसे proper आपको हर मॉड्यूल के बारे में practice होगी, information मिलेगी, क्योंकि जो the live classes are just the glimpse कि कैसे हम पढ़ाते हैं या कैसे हम डिस्कशन करते हैं और यहाँ पे सारे डाउट्स क्लियर नहीं हो पाते. So for that हमने रेगुलर क्लासेस स्टार्ट की हैं और the fee is very minimal. The fee is just 4,000 for a 5-week course, and if you want to take on a weekly basis, that is rupees 875 per week.
Okay, ma'am.
ओके तो मैंने लिंक ड्रॉप कर दिया है. अगर आपको यहाँ से इफ यू नॉट एबल टू एक्सेस द लिंक, तो चैनल का नाम है प्रेप अकेडमी, तो आप ढूंढ सकते हो यूट्यूब पे एंड यू विल गेट इट एंड यू कैन सी ऑल द सेशंस. तो जो भी स्टूडेंट्स इंटरेस्टेड हैं लाइव क्लासेस के लिए, दे कैन कॉन्टेक्ट द टीम एंड यू कैन डिस्कस एवरीथिंग. Okay, so thank you today for joining the session, and to all the students who watch our video on YouTube, thank you everyone for showing support. So we'll meet tomorrow at the same time. Thank you.